sheep, so it had white fleece. Some of them were black sheep or mixed. 9 months old. It was slaughtered on the 20th of October 2012, and it was salted to preserve it. And then when we got it, we froze it. So quite often from a skin yard, where a leather maker or a parchment maker would buy skins, they'll be salted. So you imagine the fleece, the sheepskin that's been cut off the animal, is just packed with really handfuls of salt, absolutely covered in salt, and that's to preserve the skin. And that's how they were purchased. So this is a mixture of hair and goat hair and sheep wool. And the skin also sort of plumps out in that soaking. So of course if it's been salted, you imagine the skin's been salted, it's sort of dried out a little bit as well, because the salt draws the moisture out of the skin. So we've rinsed all the salt off and washed it. And the wool or the hair, I mean, this is a sheep that's been taken from a field and taken and killed. I mean, there's bits of mud and grass and straw and all sorts of other things that I won't bother explaining, but you can imagine. It's pretty smelly. I mean, it's not a cleaning operation. So wash them, rinse them, soak them in the lime. So after about 10 days or something, you can take the skins out, and they're a sort of a rubbery, a wet skin. And then at that point, you put them over a curved surface where you can sort of stretch it out, and then use a blunt knife, but you can just do it with your hand, to scrape the hair off. And it's not like shaving the hair off. You can just go like this, and it'll come off in handfuls. It's completely removed.
Natasha, it's
is the phrase, and a beam, because it will be like a half log. But we used pieces of plastic and all sorts, because it's not that easy to get half a tree these days. And you scrape this sort of action, but it's not a difficult thing. It just removes it, just very smoothly pushes the hair off the skin. So then you've got a skin with no hair on it anymore. But then you flip the skin over. The other side is called the flesh side. So that's the side where it was cut from the animal. And that's all kind of a bit messy, because even in a very well butchered animal, there's sort of membranes and things between the skin and the flesh. So from the meat and the skin of the animal. And so you take a very, very sharp knife and flip the skin over, and then you start to do what's called fleshing, which is scraping again that inside of the skin, and it takes away any sort of bits of, it's pretty grim, I mean, it's not a very nice thing, but all the bits of membrane, any bits of sort of flesh that have been left on, any sort of horrible bits, and it scrapes it down and it takes away some of those layers until you get a sort of a much smoother inside. And you can see, have you got any bits so this is some like the edge of the skin where it's not been very well cleaned, so there'll be little bits of sort of fluffy bits of membrane and stuff that have not been cleaned up. And once that's done, at that point, that's what you would do if you're making leather or parchment or alum told skin or whatever. So you're cleaning off the hair and you're cleaning the flesh side, and then you're left with a skin that's been sort of scraped on both sides. And at that point, that's where the sort of the magic that makes parchment into parchment happens. Because the thing that makes parchment and not just like this, which is like a dog chew, is that it's been tensioned and processed under tension and dried under tension. And if you imagine like the skin, which is quite thick at this point, it's plumped up. Imagine like this is a cow or a sheep, it's got like a thickness to the skin. That skin, the layers of the dermis are like a three-dimensional network of collagen fibres. It's a living organ. And instead of it being that sort of network, like I imagine the sort of fibres of a sponge, like a natural sponge.
Think about your own body, your skin is designed
it's elastic, isn't it?
to move and stretch, in different bits around your arms and so on, stretching more than the skin over your back.
So you have this 3D fibres, and what we're trying to do is move them into layers, flattened layers. And so what happens is you take the skin, the wet skin, and this will be laid down on the floor at this point, and at as many points as you can, and this is quite important, Andrew will explain in a minute because he did this one in his garden, as many points as you can. You push in a little thing like to make a toggle to hold it. So traditionally it would be a little tiny pebble called a pippin, and you push that into the edge of the skin and then tie a slip knot round it. We used little bits of screwed up paper because it was actually a bit easier. But these little toggles, and then string it onto a frame called a hearse. And there's a circular one down in the exhibition that you'll see, and that skin was produced specifically for the exhibition by Jerzy. He made that as a commission. And so yes, you string it onto this and then tension it, and it has to be tensioned. So Andrew's playing beautifully the parchment part.
We'll get you all to come and fiddle and play.
And so this is still a wet skin, right, at this point, and then you start to scrape it on both sides, but you're scraping it with a knife, and it's having lots of different effects. It's squeegeeing out some of the liquid, and this is a material called the ground substance, which is all the kind of gloopy material within the skin, because we're going for a dry, thin material, and we've got a thick, wet material. So you're removing all that liquid, which is water, obviously, and some of the lime residue, but also the stuff that's within the cells of the skin. And you're also realigning those fibres to make a layered sort of structure, and you're not stretching it really. I always thought when I learned this from books that you're stretching the skin, because we say we're stretching it and we tension and stretch, but you're not really, because we measured neck to tail, and imagine we measured before we even took the wool off, so the measurements might not be perfectly accurate, but before it was 100 centimetres and afterwards it was 104, so it's not stretched significantly, it's not grown much, it's pulled out a bit, but it's held, but it's just you've restructured it into this. We struggled when we were writing the talk. We wanted to say rigid yet flexible, and I don't think that makes sense. But if you feel it, you might know what I mean. It is flexible, but it's not. But it's got hardness to it as well. That's not like a piece of leather. If you know what I mean.
What's the difference between these two skins? So is it from another animal, or is it
No,
it's similar.
transparent?
Well, that's the crucial thing, because this is very badly produced
Ah, okay.
in my garden on a Saturday morning.
stretched on a picture frame.
Stretched on a picture frame badly, because the joy of this is badly produced. We're trying to make, or parchment makers were making an opaque, flexible sheet material, and where I haven't got enough tension, where I haven't scraped it enough to get the fats out and so on, we've got this sort of translucent material, oily. So and this sort of gelatinised edges around here, where you've not got as much tension, you get this translucent. So part of the transformation is making it this opaque material, and this scraping is evening up the surface, taking out those sort of rougher areas, and the more work you do, the better quality. So come and have a feel of this side.
And then.
So this is the hair side, so we've done very little work on this side, so you can see it's still got the pigmentation and so on. So it's an okay parchment, but it's not very good. On the other side, we've done a bit more work, and
This is the flesh side.
you can start to feel that kind of velvety surface that you get.
And that's what you need, because you couldn't write on that. If you wrote on that, the ink would it's like writing on a piece of plastic. The ink would just bead up. You need this beautiful napped, and of course this is the flesh side, so it doesn't have that same sort of surface as the outside of the body would have had. But you can make this side like this by processing it.
You can see the difference. So this is just very quickly and roughly done. So I've taken off some of the stringy bits, but not much more. Whereas here, where it's been nicely tensioned and worked, we're beginning to get that napped surface.
And you can see where sort of the best bits, so to speak. So this is the neck, just in case anyone hasn't read it. This is the neck, and these will be the front legs, the back legs, and this is the tail here. So, and the spine runs down here. So the neck is always a bit rubbish. The neck is thicker skin, but also because of where it is, you can't get the tension and the scraping. You just can't do it physically because it's so hard. So this bit's always going to be a bit rubbish. But your best bit is always going to be sort of here, and these edges I mean, you could put another pippin in all of these places, and the more you got in, the better the tension would be. So these bits are always going to be a bit, you know, you can't scrape them properly, you can't get the tension on them properly. You end up with these sort of waste bits, and there you can see where it's translucent because you just can't get in there to do the scraping or the tensioning.
And if we turn it around again, have a look. And the other thing is, you know, we're used to seeing parchment as rectangular, folded bits of rectangular material. But you've got to think this has come off an animal, four-legged animal, and yeah, sorry, I'm going to do my movements again.
Andrew gets a bit in character with this.
So here we've got the back legs here. This is the sort of belly area. And think about your own, well, think about my belly, don't think about my belly, but think about what the skin is doing. So here I'm eating, I'm drinking, it's expanding, it's contracting. This is skin that's designed to be flexible and so on. And again around the four pits of the legs and so on. So you've got some areas, and you get this sort of distinctive patterning of the hair follicles around the belly areas and so on, and around the pits of the fore. So again, the quality of the skin depends on where it's from. So you'll see these bits, there will always be sort of more open, kind of flabbier parchment, even where they're processed.
And a bit, and you often see these sort of this kind of axillary. You often see these follicles in these bits a lot more, and the sort of you can see the direction of the where the leg would have been and where the skin is stretched around that.
And if you look around here, you can see some of this tensioning, the marks that you get as if it's not being stretched, but as if where the tensioning is happening, giving you clues that you're getting towards the edge of the sheet. And we'll look at a manuscript in a moment that has some of these areas. You can tell that it's the sort of cheaper area of it. The other thing to notice, this is, Nicole explained, we did this during a 1 week course, and because of the person who was running it and worried about the quality of skins we could get, he urged us to get as many skins as possible, and it meant that we were a mini kind of factory churning these things out.
Not very good factory.
Not very good.
A factory making something they'd never made before in their lives.
So we only had a limited time, so we couldn't really continue. So this, you know, we're very proud of this and so on. But if you were a scribe, you'd be complaining that this is rubbish, really. And we didn't really begin to start to do the next stage of finishing. So this is slightly thicker goat skin. Have a feel of that end first.
What is the one sheep you
This
said?
is sheep, yeah.
So this is a goat skin. This is an adult goat skin. So you can feel it's heavy material. I mean, you couldn't imagine writing on this. Now this is the hair side. So this is side sticking out, and that's the flesh side. Flesh side feels better. At this side, we've started to work, whilst still on the hearse, whilst it's tensioned, with again this very sharp half moon knife to break that hair side.
And this will be once it's dry. So you're sort of restructuring the skin as it's wet by sort of almost punching this wet skin with the knife. But then as it dries, and it needs to dry reasonably slowly, but as it dries, you then have a dry skin. You keep increasing the tension, keep tightening it up, and then with a very, very sharp knife, you're doing the same thing, scraping this surface.
And so the better the quality of the skin, the more it's going to have been worked on both sides. So you're starting to get this beautiful sort of velvety nap surface on both sides, which is why when it's very well produced parchment, it's quite difficult to see the hair side, flesh side, because the more it's been worked, the more of the hair follicles and so on that have been removed. And so this, you know, you get so far with a knife, and then you'd move on with the pumice stones and so on.
So this is a sort of,
That's the kind of stuff. And
this is what you're scraping off with this knife. You're scraping off, it really is like very thin sort of shavings, and it's just, you know,
and this
very
itself
sharp
is an important material, because then that gets used to make glues and so on. There's this pure form of collagen that will be used So you'd be then working with things like pumice stone. So, and there's interesting discussions about how much of this work is done by the parchment maker, and then how much of it is finished off in the scriptorium. You know, or what? And we don't really know the answers to this. You know, we know there is clear evidence of work going on in the scriptorium, but how much it's the scribe who's doing the work. And this is where it gets, you know, the wet processing is fairly quick, and as it goes on, it's more and more work goes into it, and this is the lengthy processing to produce better skins. So yeah, so and just, you know, that's me. That's me going through Sunday morning in the back garden, you know, trying to do some of this final, you know, I was trying to scrape this and see if I could improve on the opacity. And it was doing it a bit until I went right through it.
But interestingly, because Andrew's done this using a picture frame, and the tension's obviously not as, this is a pretty easy, like a well-designed frame that's possible to tension it quite well. So you've got, it's not flat, it'll never be flat, it'll always retain that animal bit, but because this has had less tension, it's even less flat. It's still, you know, this is one that was made on a hearse a bit like that, and it's, you know, it's not completely flat, but it's reasonably so, and you can work it a lot easier. This is much harder because it's actually still very much the shape of you know, the sheep's back. So yeah, from the beginning it has to be done well to produce a product that can even be taken to that next stage of processing.
And the final thing, and again, have a good look at the skin down in the exhibition. Was specially commissioned by Jerzy Winiczek, who led this course as well. And he has left one side, the hair side, is untouched more or less like that. So he's done the wet processing, but no dry processing. But he's put a lot of effort into the dry processing on the flesh side. So you'll see it's beautifully finished and matte. And a sense of sort of half the work being done. Now the other thing is, when looking at the finished, you know, the skin that's used within a manuscript, it's often easy to say, oh, we've got the edge of the skin here. It's very rare that you do, because if you think we've got all these pippins around and the strings and so on. So the last stage is actually to cut out the usable bit. We left this as it is. You cut out the usable bit, and that's the sort of bit that you never see, which is, you know, the edge of the thing. So even where you think you've got the edge of the skin, what you've got is that sort of cut edge, and it might catch bits of it, but if you feel this, there's a kind of hard gelatinized bit right on the edge, which is thicker than the rest of the skin. So that's the bit that you're unlikely to see. You might see bits of that where they're cut in. You're unlikely to see all of the cut edge.
So you will sometimes see that when they're trying to maximise the size of sheet they can get from a skin. They quite often accept that the corner will be missing, the corner where no one plans to do the writing anyway. And you'll see that in, Andrew's got a manuscript example to show you, you know, especially in a, I mean, I say especially in a cheaper book, but you see it even in you know, more finely produced books. You do see there's an acceptance of the natural features of the skin, and the same with damage. I don't know if you're planning to talk much about that, Andrew, but
a hole will tend to be, because of this tensioning, there's a small friction in the skin. It will open out into a roundish hole. So where you've got holes, it's going to be round. But that again will have a kind of gelatinized edge, which you'll not be able to work near it. So you get, there's a mixture of ways of dealing with holes. So the parchment maker could sew up a hole, and that's holding the edges together again to stop it spreading as it's worked. But that will leave again a gelatinized bit, and it's sometimes see those sewn repairs left, but often they've been partly cut out, may have been re-sewn after. So even if you've got a sewing thread there, So we're thinking, is that parchment maker's repair, or is that again a sort of repair within scriptorial parchment? And then it's being restrained against the board, and then we have these padded clips that we're using to restrain the edges. So again, as it dries, it's creating this tensioning again to take out the vacuum pleat. And again, it's a technique that we use in quite a lot of our conservation, that you often have sort of pleats, creases and so on. And thinking of it as this sort of sheet material, we're trying to remove this. And with some of these, you can have these vacuum pleats run for 20, 30, 40 leaves. You can't just do one. You've got to do them all to try and they'll come back slightly, but you'll to try and get them so they're not. I mean, again, the joy of parchment is it sort of acts as one unit. You get these kind of corrugations where they all kind of assume the shape of each other.
The way that we're sort of straightening them out is to we humidify using in situ. So we use all sorts of different things, but one of the things we use quite often is Gore-Tex or Sympatex, and as you'll know from your hiking jackets and boots and stuff, it allows the vapour to go through but not the liquid water, because liquid water is very dangerous to parchment. If you get it wet, it goes into that gelatinised, kind of dog tube type state. So it needs to be humidified very gently with water vapour and then tensioned. You can see the bulldog clips we've got there. So there's a board, a stiff boarding, and then tension it against the bulldog clips. There's a skin of calf skin up there, calf skin repair parchment. That's not one we made, it's one we bought as repair parchment. That we've done the same, we've tensioned it out on a board so that there are those pins stuck into a soft board. So it's been humidified in a cabinet this time. We have a humidity cabinet where we can gently humidify things that need to be humidified, and then tensioned out so that you can kind of control its drying. And that's just echoing the manufacturer. We have to understand how it was made to know how we can
when we come to
shape it.
When we come to put repairs on things, we're using parchment like with like, and we know it's a very reactive material that's going to react to changes in humidity, and we want our repairs to be reacting in the same way. So we're picking parchment of similar thickness and ensuring that the sort of tension is flat before we start.
Where do you get this from, this parchment? Where can you buy it?
There's one